Okay, so I was reading the AI Google for
Mhm.
like what the punk lifestyle is, and this is what it says. It's characterized by an anti-establishment belief, non-conformity, a do-it-yourself ethic, anti-consumerism, and a strong emphasis on self-expression, often manifested through rebellious fashion, music, and art, with the core values of rejecting societal norms and authority figures. So I was like, so like normal, like is this like because shouldn't this be like normal? or am I or am I like too punk and I didn't know I was punk?
Yeah. I I thought I told you that in our YouTube thing.
Yeah, I thought you just were referring to like how I do therapy, and I was like, yeah, I guess that's like rebellious, like not doing it how I was taught or whatever, making it look awesome or interesting.
I mean,
But I was like,
yes, and I think that underlies, so for me, being the punk psychologist is about my like general punk attitude coming into how I do therapy.
mm, yeah, yeah, because I'm like, do it yourself, yes, like at this time in day and age we are all broke, so we kind of have to do
Mhm.
it yourself.
Yep.
um Anti-consumerism, just again, the environment, like just financial. Anti-establishment, the way that I see that, it's more like uh keeping people accountable. Not that like you're completely like against it, but like having accountability of like, you know the the leaders of whatever, whether it's like education or like your job or like, politics or whatever. If we don't agree with what they're doing, like societal sort of like norms a lot of the times are not great. Like one of the things that I didn't even realize, so in Spanish we have this, especially in Mexico, we have a way when somebody calls out to us, we say this word which is mande, and that means uh order me, essentially. um but then I never thought about it, and I was like, wait, if you don't use that or you don't respond that way, you're not being um like mindful or respectful. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm basically telling you like just order me around and it's fine. And if I don't tell you that, then I'm in the wrong, right? And
Mhm.
and I'm like, yeah, this is probably pretty much coming from like colonial times and stuff. Probably not good, right? So like things like that we kind of have to get rid of.
Yeah, I love that because yeah, that's how I think that borrows a lot from the anarchists. And if you look at any kind of anarchy groups, there's usually some order to it, and there's leaders and things like that. And it's not necessarily about every establishment is completely bad and should be eradicated. There are some people who do believe that, but I think it's about a healthy challenge of people in leadership positions, and not necessarily just like submitting and agreeing just because they're in a leadership position.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, that's another thing that I see a lot of the time, especially with like Hispanic culture, or someone who is like lives in rural areas, or is like, not highly educated. There's sort of like this idea of like, well, you're the doctor, you're like, you went to school, you know what you're talking about, right? And I'm like, some of them, some of them,
Yep.
not all of them. So we kind of also have to be careful when it comes to that.
Right.
And
And like, and that really, as a psychologist, right? Like, I enter the room and people automatically think that, like, they should default to listening to me. But, like, in psychology, we're not really giving you a whole lot of advice on how to live your life. And it's like, well, what do you want? And they're like, well, I don't know. You're the doctor. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know you. I don't know your life.
well, no, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, so how do you think we should deal with that problem? Like, just in general. And then they're like, I don't know, what do you think? And I'm like, I was hoping you had the answers. Like, I don't know. Like, what do you want me
Right.
to know? Like, I don't,
Right. You
I
tell
don't
me.
know
I don't
everything.
know.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know things. um, so yeah, that's why I often say, I'm like, I don't know everything, but I would definitely like, walk with you in that journey when
Yep.
I'm in therapy. All right, cool. So we talked about that. Yeah, that's all pretty much. Yeah. I like that direct action one where like it is you doing something, you're right,
Yep.
that needs to be changed. So again, that's great. Punk fashion, great. I don't understand the rips though. Can you explain that? Ripped jeans. Is
Uh,
that?
Oh,
just fashionable?
well, so I
Like, did you get cold?
well, so
Sound
the
like a
rib
grandma. I'm like, oh, Sonny, did you need me to stitch up your pants for you?
so I think a current age, right? The ripped jeans, you're buying ripped jeans, but originally those were because you wore them so much that they were ripped. And back in the
See, that makes
day,
sense.
and
That
back
makes
in the
sense.
day, you wouldn't necessarily, um, you the consumerism would say, "Oh, you ripped your jeans, you need to go get more jeans." But it was very like, punk, and honestly, like punk started as poverty, like in in groups of poor people where we didn't necessarily have money to go run and like buy new jeans anytime they ripped. Um, so now it's more seen as a fashion statement. Honestly, you see the ripped jeans and things like that. But I have gone and distressed pairs of jeans to make them look more cool rather than buying things. So like we're very, big about thrifting and things like that.
Yeah, do it
Uh,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so like I'm not going to pay $150 for a pair of ripped jeans. I'm just going to go get some at Goodwill and then I'll distress them myself so that they look like I've worn them for a while.
You know that thing that I guess I have been rebelling against lately is this idea of because I am a doctor now, I should dress in a different way or like a specific way. And I'm like, but it's not comfortable. And like yesterday I did an interview for with a local like podcast, and I was super comfortable. I was wearing this like stitch sweater and I was like just hugging this like gigantic stuffed like Dr.
Oh yes,
Gremlin
I
over.
saw that. I love it.
Yeah, and then I was like, of course I would do something like it was not planned. I just like happened to go pick it up because I kept forgetting for like the past week, and I finally was like, no, I have to go get it. And they were like, yeah, you can come and showcase some of the things that you have. And I was like, I'm gonna take this because I just got it. I was just sitting there with a huge like stuffed animal, and I was like, I'm a doctor, please believe me. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, like that. And what does a doctor look like? What does and specifically, like, what does a psychologist look like? Like,
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, it just it looks like you and me. Like it looks like this,
right.
or like you. Like it just looks like normal people.
Yep.
Um yeah.
And if
Cause
you think
like
about like if we were in suit and ties right now, right, and like full business, whatever, like so many people would be turned off by that, and they would just think that we were just like totally not down to earth people. Um, and to me, it's about what's authentic, and what's authentic to me is definitely not suit and tie, but for some people that makes them feel authentic and things like that, and so they could totally do that. But I don't like when I'm told I have to do that.
yeah, when it has to be enforced because
Yeah.
otherwise you don't fit the view of what a doctor's supposed to look like. Somebody put in the comment, the doctor looked too young with her plushies. And that's what people probably thought. And I'm
Yep.
like, yeah, I do get that a lot. And like half of the time, I like forget to introduce myself, just like even my name sometimes, because I just get really excited and I'm like, yeah, let's just do this, and like, start geeking out with people. And yeah, I just don't really mention that I'm a doctor, and I'm like, hopefully people know that that I like there's the reason I'm saying these things. Like I have experience in
Yeah.
education. um but I mean, one of the things that I often say is like, well, again, we don't have all the answers or anything like that. Wait, why am I talking about this? Screw that, I can talk about this at any other time. This is supposed to be me asking you questions, which I totally did not prepared. I mean, yes, we did. About the punk lifestyle. No, actually, no, it wasn't the punk life. What were we supposed to talk about?
Polyamory and ethical non-monogamy, and then you mentioned kink yesterday, so I think it's all on the board.
Yes, all of that. Yeah. Yeah, go. Okay. First question. So what is it that you think that people need to know about when it comes to sort of like gender and like sexuality?
Hmm. I I think the first thing that comes to mind is that there's such a broad span definition of gender and sexuality and like what that looks like for each individual person. And
Hmm.
so much of the people who come to me for therapy regarding and thinking about gender issues and sexuality, I see so much rigidity in how they're viewing that human experience, that keeps them in that sort of distress of figuring things out. So I think like the one thing I would say, right, is like embrace the fact that we are such dynamic, complex creatures, and so our gender and sexual experiences are going to reflect that. And historically, we've been told that, gender is binary and sexuality is like this sort of fixed thing, and you have to have one way of doing it. And that's not really the case.
Yes. Well, okay, okay. I think this is something that uh, wait, who was it telling? Oh yeah, I was telling my assistant, and I was like, I'm really looking forward to like talking to you because I was like, I definitely would like to learn more about this. And it's just a lot easier for me to have a conversation, and it's more memorable for my brain when I'm having a conversation with someone about this topic than
Yeah.
me reading something, or like listening to a podcast or whatever. So yes, I think we are more complex. We're very complex creatures, right? And we have like one of the things since I work with neurodivergent individuals quite often, um, what I usually advocate for is to be like, hey, it's just your brain works a little bit different. So you have different preferences. Like you have different ways to find comfort, right? Like for some people is doing, facials and masks and getting massage or taking a bath, right? And for some people it's rocking back and forth or being in an environment where they're not listening to anything or listening to really loud music, or like just fidgeting every now and then. And that's fine. Like, like again, everybody has like a different preference. um why do you think there's like such fear when when it comes to things not being as clear or not fitting into like a neat little box, like how we prefer, like when it comes to like the gender roles?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to kind of how our brain compartmentalizes things. It likes clean things. It likes boxes because it
Mm-hmm.
makes it easier for us to categorize. Um, that's kind of the main focus of like cognitive theory and psychology. And so our brains like that, despite us so many things in our daily lives not fitting in clean, neat boxes. And so I think that, and then I also think it really like boils down to the fact that we live in a society that um, doesn't celebrate those differences or the complexity of gender and sexuality, and so it feels almost like we're forced into like, well, if I don't have this rigid view or this rigid identity or this rigid practice, am I wrong for that, or am I like faulty for whatever reason? So then there's that added judgment of ourselves.
I have so many questions now. I should write this down. Wait, let me go with the first one that I think is like kind of important. I don't want to forget. So okay, so we kind of like covered that, we both agree that, everybody has different preferences. Everybody like responds to like different stimuli in a different way, etc. So what will be the limit then? Is there a limit? Should there be a limit to, for example, like kink, or to how many different genders we discovered, or like sexual preferences or whatever?
I mean, to quote from Mean Girls, right? Like the limit does not exist. I think like the limits we would see would be ones that we put on it. So whatever like we decide in terms of like we as in the human experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like as a whole, I think the across the world we've determined that there are some limits in terms of like legality
Mm-hmm.
practices with sexuality and things like that. Um, and so I think like it's really about like why. To me, the question would then be why do we want to limit it? Like what's the reason for the limiting? Like why not just celebrate that it could be limitless?
Somebody. wrote a comment of they had to learn so much from other people on social media because parents tried to put them in a certain box of thinking while growing up. And I'm like, yeah, that was definitely me as well.
Mm,
And it wasn't necessarily like a bad thing. It's just there's these generalizations that happen a lot of the times, right? Like there is like if you are uh somehow using marijuana, that's already like the gateway drug to X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, no, that's not how it happens. But it's the belief, right? Because a
mhm,
lot of people have that experience, right? And like all people see is sort of like the consequences a lot of the times, right? Of whatever actions, and then that's how they judge, right? They're like, okay, well, they it's like more like nitpicking, and they're like, well, your hair was purple at the time, so it means purple hair is bad.
mhm,
Like that's why you had an accident. And it becomes this like really weird thing. And in a way, I'm kind of like understandable because we're trying to survive, right? Like a lot of the times it's parents or like your community that wants us to, I will hope, stay safe. But it doesn't always lead to that, right? It leads more to not being able to feel comfortable in your community, not asking for the things that you are needing, not having any of your needs met, and having this very sort of like rigid thinking of what's good and what's bad. At one point, I think my brother got super into um, reading about like Aztec and Mayan like mythology and stuff like that. And then he was like, yeah, did you know that there was this like god that was both like male and female, and that was like cool back then? And like we see a lot of examples, not in only in like the Aztec or Mayan mythology, but in a lot of other countries, right?
mhm.
Where this was a thing that they were like, all right, cool, like let's move on.
Yep,
Right? Like it's not a big deal, but it becomes a big deal for some reason now.
yep.
Why?
Oh,
Why?
oh, why?
Oh, sorry. No, I was just kind of like, but why? Like, I just still don't really understand why it's a big deal.
Well, it goes back to colonialism, honestly. If you look at like that's where we
Oh,
saw the shifts in celebration of gender and sexuality, because in a lot of other places in the world, it was, multiple genders, different sexualities were a bit more like appreciated and celebrated, and then colonialism and like just the taking over of the church is the kind of the two main things that started shifting that. And then now we have like, it's more widespread, and then we see folks who are seeing that the groups of people that they have, that they descended from actually had way more open celebratory beliefs than they currently have because of colonialism.
true, true.
And I sit here as a white person saying that. So
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, it's, somebody comment, I guess so many of the gods were androgynous.
mhm.
And yeah, I can't believe I said that word in like one try.
Yeah, yeah, that was impressive.
I know. I'm so very proud of myself. I was just saying that like I running on like 2 hours of sleep because I was like so excited for this, and my
Oh
ADHD
yeah.
brain was like, we're ready to go, let's do it right now. So I'm gonna crash at some point today. um, yeah. Okay. So yes, so we have sort of like these limiting beliefs that really hinder sort of like our progress, really, right? Like because we're so focused on trying to be like trying to fit in to the little box that society says, that we have no more energy or time um to dedicate, or like space in our life to dedicate to furthering our careers or being more creative, or like expressing ourselves. So yeah, that sucks. So, so i- have you noticed like a specific something that triggers that change in mentality for people, like when you are having like workshops, or you're having conversations about gender, sexuality, or kink, and it just you sort of like it kind of clicks for them, and then they're like, oh, now I understand.
Yeah. Honestly, the thing I see the most, like, where I see this change is when I kind of just lay it all out and allow people to see that it's okay. It's okay to be changing. It's okay to be questioning. It's okay to not have a specific answer and you're still valid. And I think that's that part where it's like, oh, you just gave me permission to just exist and not have a label for it or not have a specific way that I describe it. I can just experience it. So that shift from I have to label it and I have to make sense of it to I can just experience it.
It's the need that we all have to be seen and understood, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And
And having a label is nice because it lets, identifying ourselves as geeks, right? We can now identify ourselves and like pinpoint who my friends need to be. Um, and at the same time, let's say a geek finds themselves into sports, and we know like some geeks say sports shouldn't be involved. I think sports are a hugely geeky thing.
yeah.
Um, and so like like are they see themselves not into this fandom, right? They might say like, oh well, maybe I'm not geek enough or something like
Hmm.
that. um but they're still a geek, they just aren't into this. Like I don't like Animal Crossing, and like I'm still a geek, I still fully think I'm a geek. It's okay, you can cancel me if that um but like I think
Blasphemy.
like that moment of it's okay to have a label, but the strict adherence to it can be problematic for a lot of people.
I think too, there's this sort of like expectation of like, because you're so young, you're not going to be able to make the right decisions. So I will make them for you.
Hmm.
Or a lot of the times, no, you don't need to know this information. I think there was a comment where they're like, yeah, there was no conversation. So things just sort of like happened, right? And then you end up figuring out that you are, you have a massive crush on someone who's the same gender. And then you're like, wait, but nobody else is doing this. What is happening? um, so it does lead to a lot of self blame, unfortunately, because I think just as humans, and I'm like, why? How did we evolve as humans to just automatically blame ourselves for everything?
Hmm.
Like that's just like our automatic reaction to anything that happens. Like, oh, it must have been me.
Yeah.
Kiddos, when parents get divorced, kiddos are like, I must have done something to make this happen. And I'm like, no, you did nothing. Like, we're just so self-centered. We're like, it was me. It was all because of
Yeah.
me, but unfortunately that there's wait, but we only have it when it's like the negative, right? It's not when like, oh yeah, it was like, my contributions that help create this community, right? Like we don't have that mentality. We
Yeah.
just have it in the negative sense of like, yeah, it was all my fault. I caused all of these things to happen, kind of thing. And I'm like, man, come on, brains. Like
Right.
earlier we were saying, and I was like, okay, how come technology has evolved to allow us to go to the moon and like do all this like fancy tech stuff with like AI and whatnot? But why are we still doing chores? Like, why is that still a thing? Like, that should not be happening. Um, so
Like
I
I
think,
still have to fold my laundry.
like, shouldn't there be like a machine that just like folds it for you, you know, or like puts it away?
Right. I mean, and there is that whole conversation of like we really need to be focused if focusing AI on things we don't like and we don't enjoy doing, and less focus on building AI to do things we enjoy, like art and writing and
Exactly.
things like that. Like, why are we stripping our joy away?
Yeah. Um, it's productivity. I think it's the mentality of like, we need to be productive 24/7.
Not to be
Um,
that punk, but capitalism.
yeah, yeah. Punk. Oh. Wait, what was I gonna say? Oh, you know what? Okay, so a lot of the times I was telling my sibling, like, because someone mentioned that they learned a lot of things from like, social media, or well, they say social media, but I was like, I think growing up for me, it was like TV. I was watching like Cartoon Network at the time, and then you had like the powerful girls, and then there was like this androgynous like
Mm.
character, and I was like, cool, and I was like, whatever, like I just like there were so many characters like that, and I was like, okay, like so. Right? And so now when someone's like has this opinion, and I'm like, I grew up with these characters. Like, that's cool if they want to do that. Like, I just don't like high heels. Like, you go, you go if you can. Like, I cannot. Like, cosplayers. Like, I just like a whole different world that they're like wanting to do this because of the outfit. I'm like, bro, no, I would never.
Oh, him. That was his name. That I couldn't
Oh,
remember the character's name.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't.
But yes, no. Oh, cosplayers. I'm like, y'all do so much walking in those shoes. Like,
Or like just sometimes it's just like carrying heavy things. Like we met this weekend, like this cosplayer who had like this essentially like a they cut a hula hoop in like half, and then they were wearing it like in their back, and they had to like walk like holding it like this because otherwise it would like dig into their back. And I'm like, no. I was like, I would never.
look, cosplay
um
is a sport.
yeah. You know what? Yeah, we should have like an Olympic sort of like, sport for like cosplayers, because sometimes like they have to like wear these like heavy wings and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
crazy. Um, wait, go back to the conversation we are having. I sidetracked us now. So I started talking about Powerpuff Girls. Um, okay, well, I'm gonna continue. So I grew up watching. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Chowder.
Mm,
It was like in Cartoon Network, and I rewatched it. Where was I think it was on Hulu. I was watching something else, and I was like, oh, just it started playing, and I was like, cool, I like Chowder. And then I realized that there was this really cute thing that they did, because there was a little girl, Panini, that was totally in love with Chowder, and she would go up to him and like flirt with him and be like, "We should hold hands." And he's like, "What's wrong with you, woman? I don't want to hold your hand." Right? And then he would just kind of like pull away, and then she'd be like, "Aw," But then like the next day, she like try again, like flirt with him. But there was this like sort of like respect where she wasn't like super clingy
mm,
with him all the time, and also he was still friends with her. He wasn't like, ew, cooties, he was just kind of like, woman, I'm trying to concentrate on cooking or whatever, like he didn't really care about those things. And I'm like, wow, yeah, we don't really see a lot of that. And I guess, I don't know, I feel like maybe a lot of these things were just sort of like normalized for me in cartoons. um so now I'm kind of like a huge fan of Schnitzel. I think as an adult, we all kind of like he's just kind of like another Squidward, another like
mm.
Chewbacca, like
Rada
just
rada.
yeah, just just kind of like this grumpy adult because we're just so sick of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just become those characters.
Yeah. I mean, I really wish we saw more depictions of consent, because I feel like that's a good example of consent where like she was enamored with Chowder, but when he said no, she, went away, or she did her own thing. And I feel like we don't see a whole lot of like really blatant examples of like consent in kids media.
Well, it, I think it just becomes very controversial. Like anything that artists are trying to, or what was the word? Creators are trying to do, it immediately becomes like, but why didn't you include this one thing? Like, are you like racist? Are you
Mm,
homophobic? Are you what, blah 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 blah? And I'm like, no, it's just, this is just the character. Like, it just so happened that it was better this way or whatever, right? Or it was like their preference to create the character like that. So yeah, it's I'm also not as familiar with like kids media nowadays
yeah, same.
either. So I shouldn't really say much. um uh Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was like, so any recommendations as to where people can find like safe spaces? So, for example, when it comes to like freely expressing their gender, their sexuality, their kink, like, where can people find or how to create a community like that in their
Yeah.
local area?
So I it depends, right? So like, I'm living here in Mississippi now, so like not a whole lot of people. But like being when I was in Arizona, it was a lot easier because there's lots more kind of community groups out there.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I think anyone can start building things online, or at least finding things online. I actually love talking to people about like VR chat or like Discord groups, even Reddit, even though Reddit can be a wild place to exist
There's
on.
areas, like safe
Yeah,
areas, right?
yes.
Yeah.
But like to me, it's okay to find community in those online communities, especially in like our generation and younger who like are like so in like internet focused. I think it's a downside to just say you have to do it in person, because for some people they may not feel safe enough going, let's say, to the local like queer focus center or a trans specific group. They may not feel comfortable enough or confident enough to do that. So the online settings can be way more easier and accessible to them until they
Mhm.
build up that that confidence.
I think we have one in our, well, it's sort of like servicing like 20 different like smaller communities, which is not ideal. um but yeah, I think we need to sort of like take advantage, right? It's not, yes, it's not the same, but sometimes, especially with things that are a bit more sensitive, or that we have been led to isolation because of, certain preferences that we have. um it can be sort of like a huge step for us to just say, hey, what's up, I love this group,
Yep.
like whether it's like a stream or like on like a Facebook group or whatever, Discord group. By the way, we do have a Discord group for Psychology for Geeks, so come and join us. um but yeah, I think that's the thing that I'm like mainly concerned about nowadays. It's, do people have enough community, enough
Mhm.
supportive community? Because I mean, I think the easiest example I can give is like fandoms. Like we just talked about Reddit, how like there's safe spaces in Reddit and there's like not safe spaces in Reddit, right?
Yep.
So like if Reddit was your community, then it kind of eventually might become not your community because it becomes like an unsafe place for you to be. So what would you say is the line between um something that we should be doing for ourselves, like taking sort of like accountability for, and something we can just say, hey, it's just this community is cursed. Like, yeah, like I should probably like find somewhere else to
Yeah.
find support.
I mean, I always bring so much back to values, and so like really reflecting on, does this group, does this place, does this community, does this subreddit, does it bring me joy at the end of the day? Does it feel good? Does it
Mhm.
um, is it in line with my values? And reflecting on that. So like if every day I'm going into Reddit and I'm just angry and I'm just arguing with people, then
Mhm.
like it takes no time to just leave the community on Reddit. Um, but if it feels like, well, this is my only group of people, then that's
Exactly.
where finding somewhere else, and that's the beauty of so us being chronically online, is like there's tons out there that you can likely find. It just might take some energy, and the energy you're spending on like arguing with strangers online in a community you don't really fit into could be guided towards finding these groups, these pockets of people that would be a better fit.
So I also had a friend years ago say something along the lines of, it kind of falls to us to educate people on certain things, but then I also kind of see the other point of, nah, if you want to know, like you should, like the internet is there, there's schooling, there's lots of places you can go to get your information, like it shouldn't be me having to do it. So what would be, I guess, the balance that you like often recommend to people when it comes to like, should we argue with these people, or should we say our piece, should we keep quiet,
Hmm.
what should we
I
do?
The first thing that comes to mind is like, as someone who like is poly and kinky and a psychologist and a trauma person, and I work like ADHD is one of my specialties. I see so many posts daily that are just completely wrong. And I think what I tell myself and recommend to people, right, is checking in about like, is this a person who appears genuinely wanting to learn. So like if someone's just posting a hate post, they're probably not going to be open to learning anything. So
Mm.
you could write up the most clear lit review against what they're saying, and they will ignore it. They'll downvote it, and they'll just send a meme,
Mhm.
and you're done. But if it's someone asking a genuine question, and you think that your effort will actually go, it doesn't have to change their life, their
Mhm.
worldview, but at least go recognize, and you have the energy to do so, um, then you totally could. And again, it's no one's like, yes, I'm an educator. So if you're paying me to educate you on something, then of course I will take all of the time and energy to do so. But if you're not, then I'm just, I might not go into depth about it. Um, so I think checking in of like, what is it just some rant on Facebook? And do I really need to do that? And maybe you do feel the need, just because you're like, I want to stand up for this community that I'm part of. And I think someone told me on one of the last elections, that no one's like opinion politically was ever changed from a Facebook like comment section. And it helped me to realize like, yeah, I'm going in this thinking I'm going to change this person's view of this
Mhm.
community or something, rather than I just need to go in and like let people know, that this is false. And so when I shifted that, then it's very easy for me to say like, oh, actually you're wrong about this thing. Here's a resource. Look into it if you want. Versus otherwise, I would spend hours just like petty arguing with someone. Um, so I think recognizing like what boundaries do I need in place to keep my energy is helpful.
When I was looking at the punk lifestyle, one of the things that it said was that often. Wait, I need to look at it again. I don't want to be wrong. It was it was a direct action thing,
Mhm.
where they're like taking steps to challenge societal issues through protest activism and community organizing. How effective would you say that actually is?
Well, so I think that's the point, is thinking through, um, like direct action. To me, it's not direct to argue with some person who say like, let's say, who's just like homophobic, right? There's not a whole lot of change that's going to happen from arguing with someone on Facebook about that. Um, but maybe I take that energy and I go, volunteer somewhere, or I reach out to a local community. Like that would be more direct action to to actually make a difference. Is that where you're questioning? Like how effective are these like online arguments?
Well, not only that, but sort of like the actual like protests and things that happen. Because sometimes I'm like, a lot of the times I feel like, should I go? And then
Mm,
I'm like, with that one, it's not a place I feel very comfortable with, and I'm like, I think maybe there's a better way for me to support this cause in like a slightly different way, right? That I'm one more comfortable with. um but it also kind of fits into what we were talking about as well, where like like where did you need, or what's the most effective use of your time, right? Because I did a presentation on grief for my work, and I was talking about the LA fires. And then one of the things that I kind of really dislike is when this is going to be controversial, when people say thoughts on prayers. And I'm like, from a religious standpoint, I understand when you say, I'm praying for you. That is a different thing than just saying thoughts and prayers, I feel like. Because thoughts and prayers is like, yeah, I took a time to like this is just like a societal nicety, right? That
hmm
we just say. And I'm like, yeah, what's thoughts and prayers gonna do to people that are needing all these things, right?
Yep.
And then so at the end of like that grief PowerPoint that I did, I had a quote from Mr. Rogers, which I did not grow up watching, but that was the one quote that I think I read it somewhere. And I'm like, it's the one thing that I remember about him, other than he wears a sweater and he has a very calming voice.
He was also very heavily tattooed.
No way. Is he? Okay,
Mhm.
because wasn't he like the Navy or something? Was it? Am I
Yep,
just making it up? Yeah,
he's a
because of that.
veteran. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, okay. So this is a quote I'm gonna share with you guys. It's when I was a boy and would see scary things on the news, my mother would say to me, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." And that is, I was like, yes. And I was like, not only does it fit for our profession because we are the helpers, right? But even it works for us, right? When we are feeling burnt out, look for the helpers, and then
Yep.
you'll find that community of people who are like, we got you, take a rest, we understand what you're going through, right? Or like those are the people that will have like the resources that you will need to, like, shelter or food or whatever it is that you're missing because of, like, the natural disaster that was happening. So I'm like, yeah, just like look for the helpers, right? And then so sometimes I'm kind of like, and again, this is just me not really knowing about how protest and activism really works because not my comfort zone. So I don't really know much about it. That's why I was like, well, is it helpful to sort of like create this protest? And part of me says yes, because then people are like, wait, why are you doing this? And then I would think people go and look it up. That's what I would do. So I'm
Mhm.
hoping everybody else is also educating themselves in a similar way. But yeah, sometimes we have to, and I think especially during protests where like maybe it's not as safe for you to do that. I'm thinking about some like immigration policy sort of like changes where people are protesting, and I'm like, if you don't feel safe or comfortable, maybe there's another way, right? Like maybe look for the helpers, and there's a different way that you can support, like by educating yourself or educating other people, that would still lead to that change, right? And I think so. So what are you? Uh, what would be your recommendation to people who are like, yeah, but I'm just like one person. Like, how can I change all of this? Like, my values are like so far off. They're just so punk and cool, and I am such a classy dresser that nobody understands. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think like um, to me, the importance is thinking through how do I effectively advocate or protest or things like that. And I think protests, like, public protests are helpful because it does raise that awareness and it does bring about some questioning of like, well, why are people blocking the road? Like, what
hmm
is that? What's going on?
hmm
And like, there's so many other avenues that can be used as well to make the changes that are necessary that I think sometimes we forget this is a activism is a community group activity and not a one person thing. And so like, we need the people who are willing to go out and like actually protest in the streets, but we also need the people behind the scenes who are like giving money to things that
hmm
that are important. We also need the policymakers that are out there fighting, at the Capitol to make things
hmm
happen on paper. We need the educators. We need all these different people. And so finding where you actually fit in whatever that cause is. Sometimes it's not protesting, especially I talk to students a lot about, we're psychologists. And so like there's a certain thing, like if I get arrested at a protest tomorrow, none
hmm
of my clients have a psychologist for a while. My licensure might even be revoked. So I
hmm
have to think through, well, I can't necessarily go throw down at the Capitol, but what if I help fund this? Or what if I volunteer some of my efforts to, pro bono work for people on the front lines? Or
hmm
those sorts of things of like, there's lots of other things that I can do that I still feel effective, and still give to that cause. Um, because yeah, there's, we have added responsibilities. And yeah, so, but not everybody's in that privileged place that I feel like I'm in, where it's like, I don't have to go throw down on the street necessarily, but I will if I have to.
You're like, catch me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, somebody just kind of very similar experience where they're like, yeah, they went to a protest for immigration rights, and sometimes they can get violent. So you kind of have to be aware of that, right? So there has to be that balance between like trying to help out the community and make a change, but also keeping yourself safe.
Yep.
Like that's also important. You're important. Like, so don't like, just sort of like, throw yourself out there. make sure that you're also, um,
Right. And
you're safe. Yeah.
there's been lots of change that has come from protests, and there's also been nothing that has come from protests. And so I think that's where there are people who dedicate a lot of their activism to figuring out the proper, like, most effective ways of protesting, which is usually
Mhm.
when it delivers a very clear message rather than just fighting and throwing down and rioting in the street, which, Stonewall was a riot.
Mhm.
And so, like, that, there's places for it. And I think it's helpful to think through what's the most effective way for me to um, be an advocate right now, or an activist.
Yeah, so earlier today before you joined us, I said, I mean, we have so many activities planned. I think you're part of some of them, of the upcoming like events that we have, but we can't really finalize those or make sure that they happen without funding. And that's why I'm like, it's not just my community events, or it's not that Psychology for Geeks events, it's our events, right? This is all things. So if we put an event and it's free for the community, but nobody shows up, we're not going to do them anymore
Yep.
because we're just like in the red now. Nobody supported us, nobody came to see the resources. So sometimes all you have to do is show up to events, volunteer for those causes, share and like, uh, and I'm like, it doesn't necessarily. Right now, we are doing this charity stream to get donations because we need lots of things, like a sign that now our cities are like, yeah, you're doing a nonprofit fundraiser, you have to have a sign this size, and I'm like, we have no money for a
Oh,
sign,
wow.
so please donate.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, like and again, I live in a very small town, very rural, and not a lot of people have money. Like
Yep.
$10, it can be a difference between am I eating today, I might not, right? But if you're watching his, if you're like actively interacting or just saying yes I agree, or asking questions for our guests or participating in our games, that would lead the algorithm to show people, hey, there's something going on here, and that will attract people that are in a situation where they can, like, donate.
Yep.
So yeah, there's like a lots of different ways that we can go being sort of like uh anti-establishment and super punk, and like advocating for the things that we love and are very passionate about, so we can create that supportive community. um and it's not always in a sort of like bad way.
Yeah. And, like, I don't have a lot of money, so that oftentimes I'm not able to, like, donate because I'm, you know, paycheck to
Broke, yeah.
paycheck at this point. But, like, I'll donate time, I'll donate shares, I'll donate, like, in that.
Hmm.
While I might, similar to protests, right? I might really be pulled to go to a protest, but I might make a decision not to because I don't
Hmm.
really want to get arrested and in kind of my my area. So
Hmm.
um, I might still feel bad, but I'll take that feeling bad into making that an action. What can I do that's meaningful to me?
Okay. So I wanted to end it with this because I kind of stopped my research on punk lifestyle on music, and then just it just says here that it's very aggressive, raw, and often politically charged, with simple structures and rebellious lyrics. Thoughts?
Punk is often seen as one of the lowest forms of music, just because if you, like, think there, like, if you've ever heard of like the Ramones is a classic example where it's like very simple, repetitive, like guitar tracks and things like that. Um, but, like, punk gave way to a lot of movements. I would argue that punk birthed the emo music, like, movement.
Hmm.
Emo is basically just like punk mixed with crying a lot. Um, and yeah, a lot of the music, like, if you think about some classics, and, like, every group had, like, every location. So, like, there's um, like punk from, like, the UK and Britain and things like that.
Mm.
There's American punk, and then there's, like, folk punk, and then now there's, like, garage punk, where it's like people, like, literally just recording on their phone and, like, turning that into Spotify and things. Um,
Mhm.
I think the music can be very raw and emotional. And then the gatherings, so punk shows are usually very emotionally charged. Some of the most times I've cried at a rock show have been at just like this do it yourself like punk venues where it's like in someone's house.
Mhm.
Um, and it usually attracts the weirdos of society, people who have been like kind of shoved aside by other groups. And so it's really, I like it, and it gets me energized and like ready to fight.
I think for me, now that I think about it, because I had this conversation with a couple of friends where I'm like, oh, sad things. Oh, no, I don't. Stay away from me. Like, I'm not touching that. And my friends are like, no, you have to sit in the sadness, and I'm like, why? No, thank you. And then now that I think about it, and I'm like, I think it's just because I've experienced so much of it in my life that I have to balance it out with like happy things. So I tend to not really. I mean, I grew up listening to like like the oldies radio station that like my parents would like listen to. Like, so for me, like all the really sad, sort of like really romantic, like gut wrenching, songs, they're all in Spanish. Like I don't really have the same emotion with like English music because my brain doesn't understand English that fast. I guess I have
Mm-hmm.
to listen to the song a few times before I like understand what's happening. So I tend to stay away from like all the sad songs. Um, but yeah, I think I'm gonna start telling everyone I'm punk now. Maybe I
You are.
should dress more punk.
I mean, punk doesn't look like any like y- there's no one way to be punk. There's no one way to look punk. To me, it's about the values and the living that. There's lots of you can basically just find lots of arguments. There's a whole group on Facebook called "Punks Arguing About Nothing" or "Over Nothing." We can argue all day long, um,
Sometimes
and
you need to, like sometimes you just gotta pick a fight with someone about
yeah,
nothing.
exactly. And so like to me, there's no, run one right way because you could even look at like some of the bigger punk groups and you'll see people who look very straight edge and you're like, wait, but they're like in Green Day or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, well, guess what? They're a punk and that's okay.
Wait, what's straight edge? Like, what is the?
Like straight edge would be like,
Need a
no
picture.
tattoos, no piercings, suit and tie, just like
I should get a tattoo. I mean,
yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, I should get a tattoo. And like the tattoo that I want is like flowers and like I think of Loki because he's my favorite character.
I
So I'm
love.
like, yeah, I will be super punk. I tell I tell my siblings, I'm like, yeah, I'm like super evil. Like I'm doing all of these things. And then he's like, quit telling everyone you're evil. Like you're just really nice. And I'm like, but I want to be evil. Shut up. Because I think like whenever I think about evil, I usually think about sort of like people being able to make a change, right?
Hmm.
Because they usually have like the evil leaders. They have like minions, and I'm like, yeah, I want to have minions, which is essentially me wanting to have a community of people
Yeah.
to geek out with, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm like totally evil, and my brothers
Yeah.
are like, you're not actually mean or evil, and I'm like, let me just dream, okay?
Yeah, it's like I always talk about like people's villain era is really
Yeah.
just people pleasers learning to say no for the first time in their life. And I'm like, I'm here to support it, but like so villainous.
Yo, wait. Oh, where is it? Oh, right here. I went to anime Los Angeles this weekend, and where is it? Oh yeah, and I got this sticker.
I love that.
Yeah, and I was like, yes, I'm in my villain era. I think that's when my brother again brought it up, like, quit telling everyone you're evil, and I was like, I am evil. I'm telling people no and setting boundaries.
Well, I always love talking about like Disney villains and how most of the classic Disney villains are queer coded in some way.
Ursula is by far my favorite villain.
Yeah.
Scar,
Yes.
another one. Like they just have epic songs, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I get you. I
But
get
Ursula is modeled after the drag queen Divine.
Okay, so here's another story. So, yes, and also because I heard this story from my advisor actually in school, saying that the person who designed or like the character creation for Ursula, they knew this one. They were not psychologists, but they were like a researcher for like language or whatever, and they were very much like Ursula. Like they always wear purple, and they always had that necklace.
Mm.
And then they were like, yeah, Ursula was like designed after like not everything, but yeah, it was partially designed by this person who was in charge of like this massive lab and would just come in. Like she didn't know anything about like language or psychology or like research or anything like that, but she'd just be like, okay, so how do we prove that this can happen? And then the researchers are like, well, we could try this, and they're like, okay, make it happen, and you should just
Mm.
leave. And I'm like, yes, I would like that. Yeah,
That
that's
sounds cool.
cool. Yeah. Um, I forgot the name of the person though. Dang it. Otherwise, we could have like totally looked her up right now. Dr. Facilier. Yeah, you see that.
I don't know who
Okay,
that is.
wait. Before we end, before I let you go for today, um, what are some of your favorite depictions of like in media of like when it comes to like gender, kink, and like sexuality?
Oof. I think what's his name from Schitt's Creek has one of the best ways of talking about.
David.
Yeah,
Is it
David has
David? Yes, I love him.
the way that he explains like being pansexual in like the wines. I think is an excellent way of describing it. I'm trying to think.
I love that because my sibling's name is David, and
Oh,
then I just remember like I forgot the sister's name, but she'll go like David,
yeah,
and then it's just like after watching every episode, I just walk around the house being like David.
I love that. Trying to think. Polyamory. I know there's a few, but I can't think of any. Um, I don't know. And then kink is just. I think there's a. Oh, what is it called? Crap. Let me look it up. There's a show on Netflix that I really like.
And there, sadly, social media again for the win, teaching me about sexuality and stuff. Because there is this artist that does a lot of sort of like uh sort of I think it's from their own experience, like their own life, like they when they have conversations about certain things, and then they're like essentially like educating people, and I can't remember what the name is.
So the Netflix
What
show
the-
Bonding.
Mhm.
Um, it's a good one. Season 2 is a little bit better in terms of like actual education on kink and things. But that could be a good one. It's about a dominatrix who's in grad school. Um, so she uses the money from being a dominatrix to pay for grad school. Um, and then
Why didn't I think of that?
there's also is it How to Create a Sex Dungeon or something like that?
Yeah. Also on Netflix.
Yes. Hold on. Let me see the name of it. How to Build a Sex Room is on Netflix. It's really cool because the designer does a great job at really like talking about like how we need to destigmatize like just sex in general. And she works with people. She like goes into their house and like builds like the dream sex room for them. And there's a whole episode that is a whole like polycule house. And it's really cool. So it's a really good way of like recognizing, because I think when we think about like a sex dungeon or a kink dungeon, we think like is like dirty, grimy, like nasty place, which like for some of us is attractive, but for other people they may not love the idea of like a dungeon. And so she helps them create this like really cool functional space that is also primarily used for sex.
That sort of reminds me of like I think I was already like in college. I was like in my mid 20s when I realized that the dark web or like the, oh no, not the dark web. What's this? What is it? The black market wasn't actually like a place. Like I legitimately thought it was like this underground tunnel where like there was like vendors everywhere just like selling weapons and like illegal things. That's what I pictured. So
That's
okay, it's
yeah,
good to know that that's not what dungeons are referring
yeah.
to, I
I mean,
guess,
and they can be really seedy places. But let's see. Sex
but not
education.
always, right? Oh wait, go ahead.
Yeah, the
Oh,
shows the show Sex Education was also a good one. I haven't watched it for a while though, so I can't really speak to that. Um, and then Big Mouth is hit or miss. It's kind of creepy in some ways, but I think it does a good job at like really showing us some of the things we probably should have been taught growing up
mm.
that a lot of us were not. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any like Has Been Hotel is great. Doesn't have anything to do with kink or anything, but
Well, kind of a little bit. Well, they don't flat out say things, but they showcase some
yeah.
things. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let me show you. Let me show you. Let me show you. Okay. So I bought these again at con this weekend. Like, this is for
Ooh,
Hell of a Boss, and they're babies and
I
little.
love. Yeah, Hell of a Boss does I think a better job at some of the like the kinky sexuality kind of stuff, I think.
Yeah, and then there's like this one,
Ah,
very demure. And I ship them so bad. I'm like,
mm,
yes, but the
yeah,
relationship is so toxic, and I'm like, get yourself together.
yes.
Like, come on.
Yep, yep. And that's I think they're a good example of a lots of different like if you're thinking kink dynamics, but also like just sexuality in general, like in like the queer community. I think they're a good example of that. Not a good like positive, but
Yeah, it sort of represents a lot of people's actual experience.
yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm just gonna put it over here. So yay. Um. All right, so I am definitely taking too much of your time now, but last thing, did you want to talk a little bit briefly, maybe about the is it 5 or 4 components of like using punk? Wait, what are you calling it now? Punk therapy?
I mean, I don't know. Punk
Yeah,
psychology, the punk framework, using
yeah, let's
punk in psychology, whatever.
yeah, all of those.
Let's see. So that's funny. I still have I did a podcast and I have them written down. So I think it's 6 values. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So the 6 values that I use, like I say I use that I like pull from punk values that like I try to reflect on pretty much daily in my practice of psychology. Individual liberty, so everybody has the unique ability to make their own decisions and do what it is that they feel like is best. And so recognizing in therapy that just because kind of how we started, right? Just because I think this is how it should go doesn't necessarily mean that's the one right way.
Hmm.
Anti-authoritarianism, so working to challenge authority in ways that are appropriate. So part of playing the game, as I like to say, is figuring out how do we challenge that authority, and who's telling us that. So like when I'm working with someone, let's say with depression, right, they're listening to their brain a whole lot, and we need to challenge that authority sometimes because our brains do not always know what we know what's better. Our brain sometimes lies to us.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, yeah,
radical
a lot of the
authentic
times.
radical authenticity is the next one. So I like to present myself in a way that is authentic because authenticity challenges the status quo, which kind of keeps us from showing our real selves a lot of the time. Um, and so being authentic can be, especially in today's world, is a form of form of resistance and rebellion, honestly. Um, the direct action we talked a lot about of like recognizing my favorite saying is like we don't throw flowers at a broken window. So like if something's wrong, I need to figure out ways to actually directly address it, or if I see a problem, um, really working to directly address it and not just like do something that's irrelevant. do it yourself. So you're a very great example of doing it yourself, right? You didn't see that this community existed, so you're like, well, we're gonna make it happen. Um, and like I didn't,
Tired waiting. Nobody else was doing it.
right? Like I didn't see a place for someone like me to do therapy, but I was like, well, then I guess we got to make it happen. Um, so then collectivism is the last one. So like my what I like to say is during a mosh at like a punk show or something, the number one rule is if someone falls down, you stop and you help them up, make sure they're okay, and then you continue throwing down. We can't
Hmm.
do things alone, and so in capitalism, we're forced into this idea that like we have to do it all alone by
Hmm.
ourselves, when that is so rarely the case. And so recognizing that together we're stronger and we can do things, and so relying on other people sometimes is necessary.
Yes.
So those are the six values.
Yes to all. No worry, peoples. I am working on convincing for a book. I'm pushing it so hard.
Oh yeah, I just need to get my life together.
Every like month, and I'm like, so book when? Wait, I'm still trying to find that one artist because it's so cool. I want to share them with everybody, but I can't find them. Um, I did notice though that you have those listed on your website. So that made me
Hmm.
happy. So if you
Yeah.
are like me who already forgot all of the things that he just said, my apologies. You can head over to what's the website?
Oh, thepunkpsychologist.com. All one word.
Yes. And if people are interested in collaborating with you or seeking you out for services, are you open to services at
Yes,
this
so
point?
I am licensed in Mississippi and Arizona as a psychologist, and I am also approved to practice under SciPact, which means that in 42 states I can see people for telehealth services. And so pretty much, on my website there's a link to like the map of where I can see people. So as
Hmm.
long as you're somewhere in the United States, high chances are. So Cali, I know for sure is not on that list.
Are you serious?
Yeah, Cali's not on it. New Mexico is not on it. Louisiana is not on it. New York, and then I think there's a few other ones. So if you're in those states, I unfortunately would not be able to work with you. And so you can also check out my website for information on pricing and things like that. But there's links at the bottom of my website for prospective clients, for also like connecting with me if you're wanting to collaborate or want me to talk to you or whatever, in a not therapeutic way. There's also links to my email and things like that in there.
Oh, did you do like workshops and stuff?
I can do workshop, yes. I haven't done a workshop in a while, but yeah, I mean, we're
He's doing one
coordinating.
in
Yeah,
February
I
with
was like,
us, you guys.
I was like, do we talk about it? Yeah, so coordinating. I need to send you my little spiel like you sent
Yeah, like the little
me.
blurb. Yeah, yeah. I kind of like pushed all that because I was like focusing on getting everything ready for this weekend. But next weekend we have the board meeting, and I'm gonna make everyone else do work as well. So we'll have a lot more work. So yeah, soon we'll send you an email with like more information as to how that's gonna happen or how likely it is to happen. Because even though it is online, we still need funds. So
Mhm.
people, wait no longer. Donate, um, or find us in if you're at this weekend, you just it's not a pay day or whatever, or you already spent it and you don't have any money. Then find us. We are going to be doing local booths in the area. So and you can always donate like at a different time. It doesn't have to be now, like you can always help out whenever you are able to. So yeah.
And
uh
you're a 501c, right? So that means tax deductible.
Yes. So if you are wanting to like sponsor us for like one of the events, please do so. Like over here we are thanking Collect Pickups and Crafty Corgi and 2K because they donated some of the things that we are raffling off today.
Awesome.
So yes, we are definitely open to that as well. And again, this weekend when we have the board meeting, everything is going to be updated because Anime Los Angeles also donated a booth to us, and so did Anime Las Vegas. So those will be added into our website as well
Oh, I
as
love that.
sponsoring us. Yeah, I am really excited for the Las Vegas one because they're gonna have a massive Avatar: The Last Airbender like voice actors reunion, and I'm just gonna
Ooh.
faint. I just know I'm gonna spend all my money because I was like, listen, because like like all the therapists that I talked to that like no avatar, they're like, yeah, Uncle Iroh's just like us, right? Like for real. And I was like, yeah, we all want to be like him. And I was like, dude, what if we get like his autograph and then we like raffle it off, right? Wouldn't that be
Ooh.
cool? And then my brother's like, or we can just keep it. And I was like, that's why we get two, one to raffle off and one to keep for
I
us.
love that.
Because I'm like, yeah, yeah, I really want one. But you can't really see it, but he's like, there's some artwork of like Uncle Iroh up there
I love.
in that corner. He's everywhere. Um, okay, well, I couldn't find that one person, but I guess if you're really interested in the one artist that I was mentioning, that's like super cool and awesome, you can just go into like my Instagram profile and look at who I'm following, and you'll probably find them there. If you're interested. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for staying for extra uh,
Yeah.
today. Yeah, like I'm definitely wanting to do because we did one panel where we talked about gender, and I did an individual conversation with you that came out like 2 weeks ago or last week.
Hmm.
Last week.
Something like that.
Yeah, so everyone like head over to our YouTube and save that video because it's also really cool because he goes into detail about they go into detail about all of um the six punk lifestyle rules for therapists slash everyone, um and it's really awesome. So yeah, definitely check that out and subscribe to our YouTube channel because we are definitely gonna have them come back because I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, listen, I was so much I want to learn from you for
Yeah.
free,
I
so I'm
also
like,
was
yeah,
like, I was like scrolling through, and I was like, wait, I don't even subscribe. So I subscribed this morning. So
yay. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm actually not really sure how you can leave,
yeah,
but
I think I
try
clicked
just
leave here.
exiting.
So
Oh,
thank you
okay.
so much.
Well, thank you.
I hope the rest of the weekend goes well. I'll be popping in and out. So I'll be
All right.
excited to see.
Yeah. All right. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Yep. Bye everybody.
All right. Bye.